Welcome in Unreal Engine for filmmakers. In this masterclass, you will know how to integrate Unreal Engine inside of your production. I'm Leonardo and I will be your host. You can divide this masterclass in two parts. In the beginning, you will have your first approach with Unreal, and I will show you the main tools of this software. In the second part, you will know how to integrate Unreal in your production, mixing the real-time footage with CG environment. And we will teach you all the workflow, from the pre-production until the delivery. This masterclass is designed for all filmmakers that want to integrate Unreal Engine inside their production, without losing time inside this giant software. So let's begin our journey inside of Unreal Engine for Filmmaker, starting from the installation of Unreal. In this first module of Unreal Engine for Filmmakers, you will learn about Unreal and familiarize yourself with its interface. Welcome everyone to the first video of the course. Before start using Unreal, it is necessary to know how to install it on our computers. So let's go to unrealengine.com. On the home page, click on Get Unreal. From this screen, we can check the minimum system requirement for Windows, Linux or Mac. After that, proceed to install the Epic Game Launcher. Once you have downloaded the Epic Game Launcher and created an Epic Game account, you can enter on the Unreal Engine window. This page is the home page of Unreal Launcher, but I'm more interested to show you the library. From the library, we can download one or more versions of Unreal and check our project, and also browse our personal asset library. As you can see, I have a large library, but most of these assets are free. E molti di essi vengono anche scontati del 100% durante gli sconti mensili di Epic Games, per cui vi consiglio. Now let's download Unreal Engine 5.4. And once the installation is complete, launch it. In this first module of Unreal Engine for Filmmakers, you will learn about Unreal and familiarize yourself with its interface. Once Unreal Engine 5.4 has loaded, a sub-launcher will open. From this screen, we can open recent projects and create new ones, depending on how we intended to use the software, for gaming, film, video, architecture, design or simulation. In this case, we will select film, video and live events. First, under blank project, we enable star content and ray tracing. Many of you might not use this feature, and we won't actually use it in this course because it requires a lot of computing power. However, I still recommend you to enable, as it won't affect the project performance. Next, name your project. In this case, I will call it Plasma Unreal Engine. Now click on Create and wait for the process to complete. In this first module of Unreal Engine for Filmmakers, you will learn about Unreal and familiarize yourself with its interface. Once the loading of our project is complete, we will see a screen similar to this one. I say similar because I have customized this workspace composition based on my preferences and my experience. However, some of these elements will be the same of Unreal Engine default layout, such as the Place Actor window, the content browser, the outliner, and of course, the viewport. If these windows are not positioned in this way, you can always access them from the Windows menu. The viewport is the workspace where we're gonna place object, create environment, set up lighting, and even create animations. The easiest way to insert object inside our viewport is through the Place Actor window. The Place Actor is nothing more than a library of our element inside our project. For example, if I want to insert a cube inside my viewport, I just need to go to Shapes, Cube, and add into my project. As you can see, there are hundreds of elements available. May not be relevant, as they are primarily intended for Unreal gaming purposes. But It's important to know that elements like shapes, lighting, and cameras can be easily accessed from the Place Actor window. Let's give you an example. If you have a clip in your download folder, the content browser is simply a representation of our project folder. When we talk about the file manager of Unreal, it's important to clarify a key point. If you have a clip in your download folder and you drag it into DaVinci Resolve, the file remains linked to the original location. And if you will delete the file from download, you will lose the file also in DaVinci. In Unreal, things works differently. When you insert an element into the content browser, an alias will be created in the physical project folder. For example, if I right-click on the content folder and select Show in Explorer, I will find the corresponding project folder. Inside, I will see the main level, the start and content folder, and the other related folders. If I create a new folder inside the content folder, let's say my folder, it will also appear inside the Unreal project. And vice versa. If you create a new folder inside your content browser, you will see appear in the Windows Explorer folder. This feature is very useful because it will prevent to lose files. In this case, I will delete the folder that I have already created. The outliner is a list of all elements inside the viewport. I always recommend you to organize your elements in folders. In small projects like this one, finding a light, a floor, or a cube is very easy. However, in complex projects with hundreds or even thousands of elements, searching for an object can be a challenge. The best approach is to create folders. For example, I'll always start with a folder called Lighting, where I store all the lighting components, including atmospheric effects like fog. Doing this, I can also quickly hide elements when I need it. I can also create folders called Shapes and stores cube, floors, and other geometries. If I click on any object inside the outliner, you can also open the Details window, which will provide you information and adjustable settings. For example, in this panel, I can modify the transformation, the shape or material of this object. The Details window will change based on your selection. For example, if I select a light source, the Details window will allow us to adjust the intensity, the color, and other settings. There are many more panels and functions to explore, but don't worry, we will cover in the next lessons. Before moving on the next lesson about materials, I invite you to open the plugin windows of Unreal. You can find it under Edit, Plugins. We usually think about plugins as third-party extension, but in Unreal is a little bit different. Many Unreal plugins are pre-installed and we just need to activate it. For the upcoming lessons, I recommend you to activate the Fab plugin and the USD import plugin. To activate the plugin, you will need to restart your project. I suggest you to restart Unreal Engine now and prepare yourself for the next lesson about materials. In this first module of Unreal Engine for filmmakers, you will learn about Unreal and familiarize yourself with its interface. Let's move now on to one of the most important lessons of this course, the materials. A material is an element that gives specific properties to an object. We have already seen an example of two objects with different materials. the cube with the base shape materials, and the floor with the default material, which is nothing more than a placeholder material assigned waiting to apply a final material to our object. Now let's discover how to create our own material. First, let's create a new folder called My Materials. Then right-click and select New Material. We will name this material MM Material Tutorial. Click on it to open. And you will see the material editor in Unreal. Before we start to create our material, I need to explain some fundamental concepts. There are three attributes that define our material: the material domain, the blend mode, and the shading model. The material domain defines the purpose of the material. In this case, we will choose for surface. But if you click here, you will see several other options. The most common ones are deferred decals and post-processing, which we will explore later in the course. The blend mode determines the interaction with the material and the other element inside the environment. For example, if we create an opaque material, it will completely block anything behind it. We can also create a masked material. We can also create a masked material with transparent and opaque parts, or we can create a translucent material for objects like glass. The shading model specifies how two materials interact. The shading model specifies the interaction between material and light. The default lit is the standard interaction with material and lighting. With unlit option, the material will not respond to lighting at all. It will cast a shadow, but will not be affected by the lighting source. In this case, we'll create the most simple material, an opaque material with a normal interaction with the environment and lighting. What we see inside the material editor is the material attribute, which contains the properties that define the material. To modify this attribute, we need to provide data and numeric values. Partiamo dal base color. The base color is defined using three numerical values. So let's create a constant 3 vector. As you can see, we have the X, Y, and Z. But we can translate it on R, G, and B. Now open the node and choose a color, for example, orange. As you can see, the value of R, G, and B are the same of X, Y, and Z. Click OK and connect the node to our base color input. Let's talk about metallic. The metallic value determines the metalness of our material. Unlike the base color, the metallic, it only takes a single number from 0 to 1. 0 will represent not metallic and 1 full metallic material. To set the metallic, we create a scalar parameter, which we name metallic. By default, the metallic is 0, so when we connect the scalar parameter to the metallic input, nothing will happen. But if we increase the value to 1, the material will be completely metallic. Now let's talk about specular. The specular defines how the material reflects light. However, it only works if metallic is set to 0. By default, the specular is set to 0.5, but we can create a scalar parameter and call it specular and set it to 0. Now connect the new scalar parameter to specular input. As you can see, now the material will not reflect the light. We can also change the specular value and set it to 1. The roughness controls how shiny or reflective our material is. 0 will correspond to a high reflection, like a mirror, and 1 will correspond to a completely rough material with no reflections. So let's create a new scale parameter and call it roughness. Set it to 0 and connect it to the roughness input. As you can see, now our material is fully reflective. We can also play with the other values and try to find a new composition. Now we can skip the anisotropy and talk about emissive color. The emissive color determines the capability of our material to emit light. In order to set our emissive color properly, we need more nodes. First, we need to choose the color of our emission. In this case, I will use the same color of my base color. So I can duplicate the constant 3-vector node. Now I will create a multiply node. The multiply node simply will merge the information from two different nodes. So let's connect our constant 3-vector node to our multiply node and create a new scalar parameter in order to specify the emissive power. Now let's connect our scalar parameter to multiply and our multiply node to the emissive input. By default, our scalar parameter is set to 0, so nothing happens. But if we increase the scalar parameter to 0.5, the material starts to emit light. We can also set the emissive power to a very high value, like 1000, but the material will be completely white. This because the light intensity is too strong to maintain the original color. In order to avoid artifacts, I recommend you to keep this value at a moderate level. For example, let's keep it 0.7. Now let's talk about the normal map. The normal map will be add physical detail to our material. Unlike the previous attribute, the normal map requires an image texture. Also, the previous node can work with images. The images will simply add a new information about the position of the values that we worked before. To connect an image to our normal map, we need a texture sample node. Now, to fix this alert, we need to apply a texture to our texture sample node. So let's go to texture in the tape panel of our texture sample node and find a normal map texture. All normal texture map has this purple color. Choose wherever you want. As you can see, our material now obtain physical information. Let's increase the emissive power in order to see better. Okay, now save your master material and close it. Now we need to create a bench test for our material. So let's duplicate our cube. Move the cube with the gizmo. And pressing Alt, duplicate your cube. Okay, as you can see, I create a simple grid with 12 cubes. Now we can use these cubes to test our master material. To assign a material to an object, we can simply drag and drop the material onto the object. Let's apply also in the second cube. Okay, now let's imagine that I want to change the color of this second cube. So open our master material and change the base color. Save it and close it. Perfect. But now also the first material it changed. That happens because we assign the same material into two different objects. What we created before is a master material, which contains the main properties which can be used to create a material instance. That it will be independent for our master material, but will give all the information by this one. To create a material instance, we need to right-click on our master material and find Create Material Instance. I will call it ME Material Tutorial Red. If we open the material instance, a new window will appear. But if you can see, we can recognize some parameter that we created in our master material. So let's play with this value. Now let's apply our material instance into our second cube. But as you can see, we can change the base color or the normal map. Because to set them, we not used parameter but constant. So let's change our node. Right click and click on Convert to Parameter. Let's give a name to our parameter and do the same thing to the emissive color and material texture. Emissive e chiariamolo emissive color e la stessa cosa anche sul texture sample e chiamiamolo normal map. Facciamo salva. Now save and close it. And if we open our material instance, we can find the emissive color, the base color, and the normal texture. Now let's create a new material instance and call it ME tutorial material tutorial blue. Open. And now let's play with some values. Change the base color into blue. Let's change the emissive power. We can also change the emissive color, obviously. Okay, something like that. Play with metallic, the roughness. But we can also change the texture material. So let's find flat normal. As you can see now, our material instance is completely smooth, like he has no texture map. Save it, close it. Let's assign this material to another cube. And now let's create a new master material using textures. You can download the images in the description of this video. Let's create a new folder and call it My Textures and drag the texture inside the folder. Let's start with the albedo or base color is the same. The metallic, the normal, and the roughness. Now let's create a new master material, call it add material tutorial 2. Now let's open our master material and open the content browser below. And let's import our textures. Now we need to connect our texture to our input. Let's start from the albedo or this color is the same. After, let's connect the metallic, the roughness, and finally, the specular. As you can see, we create a new material based on images. I want to talk about how the images will define our input. Let's talk about, for example, the metallic. The metallic texture that we used is completely black. So, for the entire surface, the value of our metallic is set to 0. We can also try to delete our metallic, and as you can see, there is no changes. For the roughness is a little bit different. If we check our texture, we can see that is a scale of gray. In the darkest area, our texture will give to our roughness a reflective look. In the brightness area, our roughness will be close to 1. And finally, the roughness that will work like the older material. Now, close and save it. And apply our new master material to our cube. As you can see, we'll obtain all the properties from our master material. Perfect. As you can see, using the same master material we created before, I create 8 variations of that. Simply changing some values. For example, in this cube, I add a pink emissive color. And in this one, I delete the roughness and set to a constant value in order to obtain a wet result. I suggest to all of you to play with the material editor because just changing some parameters, we can create a lot of variation and we can create complex material. Now save your project and prepare yourself for the next lesson. In the next lesson, we will discover how to import elements inside our project from the Unreal Engine Marketplace and also from external website. In this first module of Unreal Engine for filmmakers, you will learn about Unreal and familiarize yourself with its interface. In this lesson, we'll discover the Unreal Engine Marketplace, FAB. To open FAB, we need to go to Window, FAB. In this new page, you can explore FAB. This is the discovery. In this section, you can find element to download inside your project or buy. In the top left of FAB, you can find this hamburger menu and check your library. As you can see, this library is the same of the Unreal Epic game launcher. Now let's find a 3D element inside the marketplace. So let's search a 3D model and in the filter set free. As you can see, there are a lot of 3D free element. For example, I will choose this food delivery bag. And now let's add inside our project. In our project, now we can find a new folder. In this folder, we can find a map with a preview of our asset, Now let's drag our mesh inside our level. After the loading of the texture, we can see our 3D model that will look exactly same like in the marketplace. We can obviously change the position of our 3D mesh using the gizmo. Inside the marketplace, we can also download entire environments. So let's delete our 3D model filter, click on environment, and set free. And let's choose an environment. In this case, I choose Modular Sci-Fi Season 2 Starter Bundle. This is a really light pack and also is the same that I used for the Plasma Star tier. Now let's add inside our project and wait the complete of our download. Inside our project, we can find new 3 folders. This because we download a bundle of 3 environments. Let's select Mod Sci-Fi Interior and choose Example 2 Dynamic. Every time we open a new level, we need to save our project. In the top left of the viewport, you can check the loading of your environment. So don't worry if you not see in the beginning all the materials inside your environment. Now we can explore and look our environment full of materials and light. For all new fights inside Unreal, I suggest you to start using pre-made environment and modified it, just to be confident with the editor. In this video, we'll not change this environment, but now you know how to download the environment and 3D element inside your project. From the marketplace, we can also download materials, characters, etc. We can also import 3D element inside a new environment, obviously. For example, I can put my delivery bag inside my new environment. I suggest you to look inside all the folders of this pack, because you can also find all the 3D meshes that create the entire environment. As you can see, there is a grid inside the viewport. This grid represents the floor position. In this case, the floor of this environment is under the grid. But don't worry, you can hide the grid opening the show panel and uncheck the grid. You can also change the look of your viewport on the perspective menu. For example, I can choose for a cinematic viewport, which will hide all the 3D information inside my viewport. As you can see, there is no more icons inside the viewport. And now you can explore your environment without distracting element. I suggest you to work with the default viewport in the beginning because you have to select object, change in positioning. I use cinematic viewport only in the final of my project in order to have a better view of my future result. Now you know how to import 3D element from the Unreal Engine marketplace, but we can also download it from external website like Sketchfab. So let's go on sketchfab.com. Inside this marketplace, we can find a lot of 3D elements. In the meantime I'm recording this course, Sketchfab is transitioning to integrate inside Fab. So some assets are already available on Fab, while others must be downloaded manually from Sketchfab. Now let's search, for example, a robot. Use filters and set it to downloadable. And let's find a 3D model. For example, this cleaning robot is available also on Fab. But we can also find other 3D element exclusive on Sketchfab. For example, this beautiful 3D mecha. Click on Download 3D Model and choose the format. In this case, we can choose from FBX, USD, GTF, and GLB. I usually prefer use FBX or USD. In this case, I will download the USD file. I remember you to activate the USD importer inside your project if you want to import this 3D element. Now let's create a new folder called My Assets. I always prefer use a custom folder to organize 3D element provided by external marketplace. Obviously, this is not a rules. You can organize your content browser as you wish. Now inside My Asset, let's create a new folder called Robot. And inside this folder, let's drag our USD file. Let's confirm the folder destination and press OK. Here you can find all the elements inside your USD. Leave all the default values and press Import. Using USD file is very useful because after the import, all the materials, meshes, and texture will be organized inside folders. So let's drag our 3D model inside the viewport and change its position. Now pressing on R, we can activate the scale gizmo and change the scale of our 3D object. You can also deactivate the snap on the rotation, click on this icon, and now you have a smooth scalar of your 3D element. Let's deactivate also the snap on the position and the rotation, and pressing on W, we can activate the position gizmo, and pressing on E, you can activate the rotation gizmo. Okay, now let's choose a better position for our robot. Okay, now you know how to import element inside your project. In the next lessons, we will create our first environment. So you can choose your favorite element inside the marketplace and import inside your project to create your first environment inside Unreal Engine. In this first module of Unreal Engine for filmmakers, you will learn about Unreal and familiarize yourself with its interface. Before we start to create an environment inside Unreal, I want to explain one last method for import 3D asset inside your project. Specifically, I want to use asset from Electric Dream Environment Pack. However, since this pack was designed for Unreal Engine 5.2, importing directly inside Unreal Engine 5.4 can create some compatibility issues. So we need to download the proper version of Unreal Engine, in this case 5.2, and after create a new project inside Unreal 5.2. Once we create our project inside Unreal Engine 5.2, we can close immediately and proceed with the import of Electric Dream Environment Pack. So click on Add to Project and find your project in Unreal Engine 5.2. In this case, I name it Importer. Click on Add to Project and wait for all the assets to load. Once the process is complete, check Megascan folder inside the content browser. Now, instead of manually copying each asset, you can simply migrate all of them. To do that, you just right-click on Megascan folder and click on Migrate. All these folders will be imported inside your project. Press OK and find the content folder of your Unreal Engine 5.4 project. Confirm and wait for the complete of the migration. The migration process may take over some time, so be patient. Once completed, you will find all the texture, materials, and meshes inside your main Unreal project. Now, if you open the project, you will see a Megascan folder containing asset, vegetation, and decas, which we'll explore later. Thanks to this folder, you now have all the elements you need to start creating an outdoor environment inside Unreal. Welcome in Unreal Engine for filmmakers. In this module, you will learn how to create your first environment inside Unreal Engine. Okay guys, this is one of the most funny lesson of this course. In this lesson, we learn how to create our first environment. For the first thing, let's rename our level in LVL test material. LVL corresponds to level. I suggest you to use abbreviation in your content browser in order to organize better your materials. Now let's create a new level called LVL My Environment. Save it. This is an empty level. First thing, we need to create a basic illumination in order to see all the objects inside our environment. To do that, we can use the Environment Light Mixer. From this page, we can add all the elements to create our light environment. For example, the skylight, the atmospherical light, the sky atmosphere, the volumetric cloud, and finally the height fog. We not talk about the lighting in this lesson. I create a specified lesson about lighting. But you have to know that with these 5 elements, we can see our environment clearly. Let's organize our lighting inside the viewport. And now let's create our first terrain. So let's go on selection mode and change the mode in landscape. Now we see a grid. This grid is the size of our new landscape. For this lesson, I think this grid is great. We don't need a giant environment. So let's the default value. You can also change the size of your environment, obviously, in the overall resolution, and create. Now we can paint our terrain using the sculpting tool. As you can see, you have this brush, and we can change the setting of this brush through the tool settings and the brush settings. As you can see, there are 2 circles in our viewport. That circles correspond to the fall off of our brush. We can change the fall off and also the strength. Okay, and now let's try to sculpt our environment. Try to be gentle with the click of our brush, because more longer is the click, more okay, let's think that this is our ending point. We can obviously delete our modification using the erase brush, as you can see, or create ramps using the ramp tool. I suggest you to don't use ramp tool in this case. Just create your floor using the sculpt tool and the erase tool to delete modifications. Now let's return the place actor menu, and as you can see, we have the default material in our terrain. So we have to apply a material on it. We can go on Megascan folder, surface, and choose a surface that we prefer. In this case, I shall mossy grass. As you can see, we don't have the material, but we can build using the Megascan master material. We can find the Megascan master material, opening a material instance of Megascan, and look for the parent. The default material will be the master material of all Megascan materials. Let's reveal our master material in the content browser and create a material instance. And I will call you MME Mossy Grass. I will change the location of this material instance in the Mossy Grass folder. We can move, copy, or do an advanced copy. I suggest you in this case to move simply our instance material. Let's open it, and in texture map section, we will change the albedo, the normal, and the air texture, which is a single texture that combine multiple input, like the roughness and the anisotropy. Now we have our material. Save it. Click on landscape in the outliner and search for the material landscape. Let's drag our material instance in the landscape material, and now we apply our instance material into our landscape. This material works differently based on the ground, so don't worry if you see some changes. I think it's pretty good to create more natural look to our ground. Let's go on Megascan now and let's import some asset. But now there's a problem. There are a lot of folders and a lot of elements inside this folder, but we can use filters in order to see better what we want to use. So in filter page, you can choose static mesh. And now we can see all the static mesh in our 3D asset folder. If you don't see this little section here, you can also use filters from this icon and choose static mesh. Now let's choose a first static mesh and let's drag inside our viewport. When you create your first environment inside Unreal, I suggest you to use reference images of real world in order to have a better idea and better pre-visualization of your creation. Once you chosen your references, you can start to drag. Your meshes will appear inside your environment. But your meshes will appear inside your environment. But your meshes will appear inside your environment. We have also wait for the loading of the material, but after that you can see your static mesh with its material applied. As you can see, the Mossy Grass material also change its behavior based on the static mesh that touch the terrain. I think that is really good because create a really realistic look inside our environment. As we are creating a natural environment, I suggest you to deactivate all the toggles in the viewport. I suggest you to use toggles only for architectural purposes and not for organic environment. Now we can create something really simple. In the next lesson, we will see a tunnel made by these big rocks. So let's insert a new mesh inside our environment. Let's change the position. Okay. And now we can also duplicate these two meshes and rotate in order to create a specular wall. Okay, perfect. We are creating a really simple environment, but we also can add some meshes in order to hide some landscape element that can appear really too gaming and simply. For example, this one we can use as a sort of mountain. Like this, okay. There are also a lot of meshes that we can use for hide the ground like this. As you can see, just using this mesh, we can create a really more realistic ground for our environment. Let's choose a right position And we can also duplicate the same mesh and rotate in order to create a realistic look without adding different meshes inside our environment. In this, as you can see, we create a realistic look using one single mesh. The creation of a landscape is really long process. I think is really funny. Take your time and think what we want to tell in your story. Honestly, for me, it's not a problem. Spend a lot of time creating an environment because for me, the environment is the key to place the character and tell the story you wanted. I suggest you to ask every time you are adding an element inside your environment to think what we want to tell adding this element. I will spend, I think, 2 or 3 hours creating this environment, so I will not show you all the process, but obviously I will tell you all my ideas behind the environment I will create. So spend all the time you need to create your environment until you think, wow, cool, this is a great idea. You can also replicate my environment that I will show you in the next lesson, obviously. But before, I want to show all the icons inside the viewport. From the perspective, we can change the view of our viewport from the top, the bottom, the left or the right in this orthogonalic view. I think it's very useful when we have to manage spaces inside our environment. But I mostly use the perspective window. In the second icon, we can change the look of our viewport. We can use the lit mode, the common mode of our environment. You can use the unlit mode to see only the base color applied on our meshes. Use the wireframe, use here the detail light, etc. I suggest you to remain, if you want to light up your environment, you can use the unlit mode. But I suggest you to change the scalability settings. In this case, I use the cinematic settings, so it is the maximum quality for my environment. But when you are working for the environment, I suggest you to change to medium or high. If you don't see this icon in the viewport, you can also find it in the setting in the top right, in the engine scalability settings. In the right side of our viewport, we can switch from the selection mode, the translation mode, the rotation, and the scale. Pressing on this icon, we can change the gizmo mode. We can use the local gizmo or the global gizmo. If you use the global gizmo, the center of your object will become the center of your world of your 3D environment. I suggest you to use the local gizmo because it's very most simply to understand. You can also change the snapping of the surface and also the snapping of the position, the rotation, and the scale. For the position, scale, and rotation, we can also change the size of our snap. And finally, we have the camera speed. As you can see now, my camera is setting to a normal value 1, but if we change our speed value like this, something for 32, you can see that my camera is really, really faster. We can also multiply this value. And now I really, really more fast. Since we are not creating an open world environment, I suggest you to choose a value between 3 or 16. And this icon, we can split our viewport in 4 view. Can be useful when you want to manage spaces and see in the meantime all the inside a single viewport. Now we will see in the next lesson when our environment will be ready. Welcome in Unreal Engine for filmmakers. In this module, you will learn how to create your first environment inside Unreal Engine. Okay guys, this is my first environment with the all asset inside. As you can see, I create a corridor using these giant rocks. As you can see, I create also this cave with the large hole on the top in order to illuminate this cave from also the sunlight. Inside this cave, I put this rack of a starship. We use the unlit mode in order to see better. As you can see, I insert all these assets in a very randomic way. I obtain all these assets for a free pack inside the Unreal Marketplace. But as you can see, I also add some natural element like flowers and plants. We use the lit mode to see better. Okay, like this or like this. We can also decide to create our environment with full vegetation, but insert every single flower inside our environment can be very stressful. To do that in a smart way, we can use the foliage mode tool. This tool can be activated from the section mode and switching from the foliage. Now we see the foliage mode page. This is the paint section, so the main section of the foliage mode. We can set our brush from the settings. We can also decide which element can obtain the foliage in our environment. And in this drop foliage here, we can insert our foliage meshes. We need to find a mesh foliage actor, which is different from the common mesh actors. In my case, I can find in Megascan folder and use the filter static mesh foliage. I can choose from all these mesh foliage and insert inside my foliage panel. In this case, I will use these meshes that will cover my ground. So let's drag inside our foliage panel like this. And as you can see, in each icon mesh, we have a counter. This counter represents all the instances inside our environment for each mesh. We can also change the brush settings like this. And also the density of our mesh. In this case, they are very high number, but we can increase. We have the radius and also a variation of the scale of our asset. In this case, I can use 1 for the minimum and 1.2 for the maximum. I suggest you to don't create a really big variation. And also we can adjust the ground slope angle, which is the angle range which we can paint inside of it. For example, in this case, I set the maximum of 45 degrees, so I can paint in the walls. If I change the degree in 100, as you can see, I can paint on my walls. Now let's start to paint in our ground. In this case, I think the density is very high, so we can increase. Let's try with 25. Let's increase. Let's try with 1000. We can also decrease the density of our paint tool. Okay, now we have to paint all the ground. Obviously, I suggest you to use references to understand the behavior of the foliage inside a real environment. In this case, I'm only creating a really simple environment, so it's just in order to explain you the tool. We can also paint inside this footbridge. increasing obviously the density. Okay. And we can also cover some element with the foliage. In this case, I can increase the size of my brush. I want to cover these stairs. And I can choose for the unlit mode in order to see better my stairs. I can increase the size of my foliage, something like 0.2 and 0.3. Okay. Let's increase the density. And now we can paint our stairs. You don't have to follow all my ideas. You can create your foliage as you want. Let's paint this tube. I think that these details will change the environment, will make the environment really, really realistic. Let's increase our paint tool and let's paint the ground again. Let's change the brush size. Okay. Okay, I worked in unlit mode just to see better my dark area of my environment. Now switch to lit mode, and as you can see, we create our foliage ground. Obviously, you can change every type of foliage you want for the ground. For my idea, this is the better solution, but you can choose wherever you want. As you can see, the counter now is really, really higher than before. And let's think about to insert all of these elements manually. Now we can add some plants, some really plants. I will choose 3 of this foliage. Let's deactivate all the ground foliage and let's activate our new plants. Now it's possible that our settings for the ground foliage will not be okay for our plants. Now let's try. In this case are okay, but I prefer not to use so much density. So I will increase the density from something about 10. I can also adjust the scale variation from 1 to 1.8. Okay. I will not use so much these plants, but I think this okay. Nothing too much. Okay, I think this is a really good starting point. Now you know how to use the foliage. You can obviously add more foliage in your environment. As you can see, it's a really, really fast process. Now let's fun with the foliage tool and let's win the next lesson about lightning.